What if I told you that one public insult, spoken at the wrong time to the wrong person, dismantled 15 years of confidence in just 7 seconds? Not inside a dojo, not in a tournament, but inside one of the busiest airports in the United States, with families, children, business travelers, and strangers watching, and absolutely no room to retreat. A man wearing a black belt said something he believed, with complete certainty. He said Kung Fu was useless. And Bruce Lee didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't explain philosophy. He simply looked up from his book, closed it, and said 2 words that would change everything. What followed wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't theatrical. But it was so fast that most people didn't understand what they had just witnessed until it was already over. And this is where most versions of this story miss the point. This isn't about Bruce Lee winning a fight. It's about how real mastery exposes illusion, and why ego collapses the moment it meets truth. This story begins at Los Angeles International Airport, Terminal 3, on Friday, March 15, 1973. It's just after 3:30 in the afternoon, the height of spring break travel season. The terminal is crowded and restless. Families struggle with luggage. Children run between plastic seats. Businessmen in suits flip through newspapers. College students sit on the floor with backpacks and headphones. The PA system crackles with flight announcements, some boarding, some delayed, all competing with the constant background noise of rolling suitcases and impatient voices. The air smells like burnt coffee from the concession stand, jet fuel drifting in from the runway, and that unmistakable mix of recycled air and industrial carpet cleaner that only exists in airports. Everyone is tired. Everyone is irritated. Everyone wants to leave. Everyone is distracted. Everyone except one man. Bruce Lee is sitting alone near Gate 27, waiting for his flight to Hong Kong. He's 32 years old, 5 feet 7 inches tall, weighing around 135 pounds. Compact, lean, every ounce of his body functional. He's dressed simply in dark slacks and a black top, with a leather jacket folded beside him, and a small carry-on bag at his feet. Reading glasses rest on his face as he studies a manuscript filled with handwritten notes. It's an early draft of his evolving martial philosophy, the ideas that would later be known as Jeet Kune Do. Bruce doesn't look like a movie star. He doesn't look dangerous. He looks like a professor stealing a quiet moment in a chaotic place. But his body tells a different story if you know what to look for. Bruce has been awake since before dawn. At 4 o'clock that morning, he went for a 5-mile run through the quiet streets of Los Angeles. After that, he spent time on the heavy bag, striking and refining timing. Later, he worked through flexibility drills, pushing joints and tendons to their limits. His knuckles are still slightly swollen. His lower back aches faintly from overstretching the night before. His body is tired, but his mind is sharp. He's not here to prove anything. And that matters, because what happens next only works because Bruce Lee isn't looking for validation. Then the energy in the terminal shifts. A tall man enters the gate area from the direction of Gate 28. He stands out immediately, 6 feet 2 inches tall, around 210 pounds, broad shoulders, confident posture. He's wearing a clean white Judo GI with a black belt tied firmly around his waist. The belt isn't new. The edges are frayed. This is not a costume. This is someone who has put in real time. His name is Robert Shin. He's in his late 20s, a 6th-degree black belt in Judo with over 15 years of training. He competes regularly, has placed in regional tournaments, and teaches at a dojo in West Los Angeles. He is respected, skilled, legitimate. His gym bag hangs from one shoulder, and his hair is still damp with sweat from training. Robert is walking toward his gate when he suddenly stops mid-step. His eyes lock onto Bruce Lee sitting quietly with a book in his hands. He recognizes him instantly. anyone in the martial arts community would. Bruce Lee is already known, even before global fame, not just for movies, but for something more dangerous: his ideas. Bruce Lee has been openly challenging tradition. He has been saying things that unsettle established systems. Absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, add what is uniquely your own. To traditional martial artists, this is an innovation. It feels like an attack, because if Bruce is right, then decades of rigid adherence suddenly look fragile. Robert feels the threat in his chest. This isn't admiration. This isn't excitement. It's resistance. Fear that the art he has dedicated his life to might not be complete. Fear that tradition alone might not be enough. He adjusts his stance, squares his shoulders, and walks directly toward Bruce. People nearby sense it immediately. Conversations soften. Heads turn. Humans are wired to detect conflict before it happens. Robert stops about 5 feet away from Bruce and says nothing at first. He just stands there, looming. Bruce senses the presence without looking up. Years of sensitivity training have taught him awareness without tension. He calmly lifts his head, removes his reading glasses, and sets them on top of his manuscript. His expression is neutral, calm, present. Robert speaks loudly enough for the surrounding gate area to hear. He says, "You're Bruce Lee." It's not curiosity. It's accusation. Bruce nods and replies simply, "Yes." Robert's jaw tightens. He says he has seen Bruce's movies and demonstrations. Then, with no hesitation, he says the words that freeze the terminal. Kung Fu doesn't work. Everything stops. People pause mid-motion. A child stops playing. A man lowers his newspaper. A woman freezes with a coffee cup inches from her mouth. Robert continues, saying that against real martial arts like Judo and wrestling, Kung Fu is useless. He gestures to his black belt and says this works. Yours is just show. Movie fighting. You can feel the ego behind the statement and the fear underneath it, because when someone attacks an art so publicly, they are really defending their identity. Bruce doesn't argue. He doesn't defend Kung Fu. He doesn't explain philosophy. He looks at Robert the way a doctor studies symptoms, reading what's beneath the words. Then Bruce closes his book, stands up slowly, and meets him at eye level as best he can. There's no aggression, no challenge. And then he says 2 words that nobody expects. "Show me." Robert blinks, genuinely caught off guard. He wasn't expecting agreement. He wasn't expecting calm. He was expecting resistance, maybe an argument, maybe anger. He asks Bruce what he means. Bruce answers quietly but clearly, telling him to show him that Kung Fu won't work. The words carry across the gate area, now completely silent. A businessman a few rows away nervously mutters that this probably isn't a good idea. Bruce raises one hand slightly and reassures him that no one will get hurt. The certainty in his voice feels unsettling, not arrogant, just factual, like he already knows the outcome. Robert sets his gym bag on the floor. People instinctively step back, forming an open space between the rows of plastic airport chairs. Some are excited, some are nervous. An elderly woman pulls her grandson closer. 2 gates away, a security guard notices the sudden movement and starts walking in their direction. But he's far enough away that whatever happens will be finished long before he arrives. Robert steps into the open space and drops into a proper judo stance. Feet shoulder width apart, knees slightly bent, hands up and ready. 15 years of training settle into his body. This is familiar ground. He looks confident, prepared, dangerous. Bruce does not take a stance. He stands naturally, feet relaxed, arms loose at his sides, breathing steady. He looks like he's still waiting for a flight, not preparing for anything physical. The lack of form irritates Robert immediately. It feels like disrespect. Robert tells Bruce to put his hands up. Bruce shakes his head slightly and says he doesn't need to. That small response is enough to push Robert forward. Robert moves fast, not recklessly, not emotionally, but decisively. Years of competition have trained his body to act without hesitation. He closes the distance in 2 quick steps and reaches for Bruce's upper body, aiming for a traditional grip. In Judo, control begins with structure. Get the grip, break balance, execute the throw. It's a system Robert has trusted for most of his life. Bruce moves at the same time, but not backward. He moves through the attack. His left hand intercepts Robert's wrist mid-motion, not blocking it but catching it before the grip can form. There's no visible force, no struggle, just timing. Robert doesn't even realize his hand has been redirected yet. Almost immediately, Bruce's right hand taps the inside of Robert's elbow. The strike is light, almost gentle, but it hits a nerve point that collapses leverage instantly. Robert's arm reacts before his mind does, bending in a way he didn't intend. His structure breaks. The grip fails. Bruce steps slightly to the outside, just a few inches off the center line. It's a small movement, but it changes everything. Robert's momentum continues forward into empty space. His training tells him to recover, to plant his feet and reset, but Bruce doesn't allow him the time. Bruce's foot sweeps across the floor, contacting Robert's lead leg at the exact moment his weight is shifting. The timing is perfect. The sweep isn't powerful. It doesn't need to be. Resistance is impossible at that moment. Robert's base disappears. Robert knows he's falling. 15 years of break-fall training kick in automatically. His chin tucks. His body prepares to absorb impact. But something feels wrong. This isn't a throw delivered with force. This is control applied with precision. Robert hits the airport carpet flat on his back. Not slammed. Not injured. Guided. Bruce stays connected the entire weight down. His left hand maintains control of Robert's wrist. His right hand shifts to Robert's shoulder, guiding the descent and ensuring there's no injury. Bruce drops one knee near Robert's chest, not applying full weight, just enough to establish position. Robert is pinned, controlled, helpless without being hurt. Bruce positions his right hand near Robert's throat, not touching, not threatening, just close enough to make the message unmistakable. Then he speaks quietly, so quietly that only Robert can hear him. He asks if he wants to tap. The gate area is completely silent. People are frozen mid-movement. A man halfway through sitting down remains standing. A woman's coffee cup trembles in her hand. Children stare without understanding what they just witnessed. 7 seconds. From first contact to complete control. The security guard finally arrives, breath slightly heavy from walking quickly. He sees Robert on his back and Bruce kneeling beside him. He reaches for his radio, unsure of what he's walked into. Bruce notices him immediately, releases Robert's wrist, stands up slowly, and steps back several feet. His hands are visible. His posture is calm and non-threatening. Every movement communicates that the situation is over. Robert stays on the ground for a moment, staring up at the ceiling. He isn't in pain. He isn't injured. But his entire understanding of combat is collapsing in real time. Bruce extends his hand to help him up. There's no mockery in his face. No triumph. Just an offer of assistance. Robert hesitates, then takes the hand. Bruce pulls him to his feet easily. Robert's legs feel unsteady, not from exhaustion, but from psychological shock. The security guard asks what's going on. Bruce answers calmly, explaining that they were having a discussion about martial arts and that Robert asked for a demonstration. He assures the guard that no one is hurt. The guard looks at Robert, who nods slowly, still struggling to find words. After a brief warning about keeping things peaceful, the guard walks away. Bruce picks up his jacket, returns to his seat, and sits down. He puts his reading glasses back on and opens his manuscript exactly where he left off, as if nothing unusual has happened. Robert stands there for several seconds, then slowly sits down a seat away from Bruce. Not beside him. Close enough to talk, but not too close. They sit in silence before Robert finally speaks. He asks Bruce how he did that. Bruce looks up, closes his book, and removes his glasses. He tells Robert that he is a very good judoka. Robert immediately bristles, thinking he's being patronized, but Bruce continues, explaining that Robert's stance was correct, his entry was fast, and his technique was solid. Bruce tells him the problem wasn't skill. The problem was rules. Robert fought expecting structure, grips, and cooperation within a shared system. Bruce didn't give him any of that. Bruce explains that Robert has spent 15 years training against people playing the same game, and that Bruce doesn't play games. He fights reality. Robert swallows and asks quietly if his art failed him. Bruce shakes his head and says no. He explains that judo is beautiful and effective, but it's optimized for a specific context. When that context disappears, limitations appear. That isn't weakness. That's reality. Bruce asks Robert what happens when an opponent refuses structure. Robert answers honestly that he loses. Bruce corrects him and says that he learns. Then Bruce explains that this is why rigid systems eventually break and adaptive ones survive. Bruce tells Robert to be water. He explains that water doesn't fight the container. It becomes the container. It flows around obstacles and adapts to pressure. Judo, he says, is Robert's foundation, but foundation isn't the same as a ceiling. If Robert is willing to evolve, he can become something more than just a judoka. The PA system crackles overhead, announcing the boarding of Bruce's flight to Hong Kong. Bruce stands and gathers his jacket, bag, and manuscript. Robert stands too, suddenly afraid of losing the opportunity. He asks Bruce if he can train with him. Bruce studies him carefully, not looking at his belt or his size, but his sincerity. He reaches into his jacket pocket, pulls out a business card, writes an address on the back, and hands it to Robert. He tells him to come by his school in Chinatown on Tuesday or Thursday evenings, but only if he's serious. He tells him to leave his ego at the door, even if he wears a black belt. They shake hands. Bruce walks toward the gate. People instinctively step aside, still processing what they witnessed. Robert remains standing, holding the card, feeling an ache in his back from the fall and a deeper ache in his sense of identity. The terminal slowly comes back to life. People begin moving again, conversations restarting in quieter tones, as if everyone senses that something unusual has just happened. No punches were thrown. No shouting erupted. No chaos followed. And yet the energy in the air feels different, like a line has been crossed that can't be uncrossed. Robert stands there for a long moment, staring down at the business card in his hand. Black ink, simple lettering, an address in Chinatown. It doesn't look important, but it feels heavier than anything he's ever carried. 15 years of training, 15 years of certainty, all cracked open in 7 seconds. His body feels fine. No injury. No pain worth mentioning. But his mind refuses to settle. Because losing isn't what hurts most. Being wrong hurts more. Especially when your entire identity has been built on never questioning the system that shaped you. He replays the encounter again and again. The grip that never formed. The balance that vanished. The calm in Bruce's eyes. Not aggression. Not dominance. Understanding. Over the next few weeks, Robert returns to his dojo in West Los Angeles. Same mat, same walls, same techniques. His students move the way they always have, and he teaches the way he always has, but something feels off. Movements that once felt solid now feel predictable. Entries that once worked now feel dependent on cooperation. He starts noticing openings he never noticed before, and realizing how much of his success relied on shared rules. What unsettles him most isn't the memory of being taken down. It's the realization that Bruce never opposed judo at all. He simply stepped outside of it. And that thought begins to haunt Robert. If Bruce's philosophy is correct, then tradition alone isn't protection. If absorb what is useful is right, then rigid loyalty becomes a liability. And if that's true, then entire systems risk becoming obsolete if they refuse to evolve. 3 months after the airport incident, Robert finds himself standing at the bottom of a narrow wooden staircase in Chinatown. The steps are worn and uneven, polished smooth by decades of use. From behind a closed door above him, he can hear the sound of bodies moving, feet sliding, controlled strikes landing. The rhythm is unfamiliar but purposeful. A simple sign hangs beside the door: Jun Fan Gung Fu Institute. Robert hesitates. He's wearing plain training clothes. No GI, no belt, no symbols of rank. For the first time in years, he feels like a beginner again. He takes a breath and climbs the stairs. Inside, the room is alive. Students train in pairs across a hardwood floor darkened by sweat and time. There are mirrors along one wall, heavy bags along another. The air smells of liniment oil and effort. There are no belts on display, no trophies, no hierarchy advertised. Just work. Bruce Lee is teaching. Focused, precise, calm. He moves through the room correcting angles, adjusting posture, demonstrating principles rather than techniques. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't dominate the space. He teaches by clarity. Bruce notices Robert enter and gives him a brief nod before continuing the lesson. After the demonstration, Bruce gathers the class and introduces a new student. He tells them that Robert is a 6th-degree judo black belt with 15 years of legitimate experience. Then he adds that today, Robert is a beginner. There's no mockery in his voice, no challenge, just fact. Bruce bows. The class bows back. Robert bows too. No judgment, no hierarchy, just learning. For the next 2 hours, Robert struggles. Sticky hands drills feel foreign. Sensitivity training exposes habits he never realized he relied on. His judo instincts resist at first and fail again and again. But slowly, something changes. He stops forcing outcomes and starts responding to pressure. He stops chasing structure and starts reading movement. Week after week, Robert keeps coming back. He trains. He learns. He unlearns. Over time, he begins to understand what Bruce meant all along. This was never about Kung Fu versus Judo. It was never about styles. It was about truth, about reality over ritual, about adaptability over identity. Years pass. Decades pass. Robert grows older and wiser. He opens his own school in West Los Angeles, one that blends judo foundations with striking, wrestling, and movement principles inspired by Bruce's philosophy. On the wall of his office hangs a black and white photograph. Bruce Lee stands beside him, one hand resting on his shoulder. Both are smiling. When students ask about the photo, Robert tells them the story of the airport. He doesn't tell it to glorify himself or to impress anyone. He tells it as a warning. He always ends the story the same way. He says he challenged Bruce Lee to prove that Kung Fu was useless, and Bruce proved something else entirely. He proved that mastery isn't domination. It's generosity, and that real strength doesn't need permission to be calm. 7 seconds. That's all it took. 7 seconds to dismantle an ego. 7 seconds to create a lifelong student. 7 seconds to reveal the difference between confidence and certainty. Most people think this story is about a fight. It isn't. No trophies were earned. No titles were taken. No crowd cheered. What actually happened in that airport was far more rare. A man met someone who wasn't afraid to be right or wrong. Bruce Lee didn't prevail because he was faster or stronger. He prevailed because he was freer. Free from ego. Free from tradition as identity. free from the need to protect an image. And that freedom unsettled someone who had spent 15 years building walls instead of bridges. Think about how many arguments today exist only because someone needs to be right. How many people defend ideas they've never questioned, habits they've never tested, beliefs they've never challenged. Bruce Lee didn't humiliate Robert. He invited him forward. That's real power. Anyone can dominate. Very few can elevate. Bruce could have walked away at that airport. He could have argued. He could have embarrassed a challenger in front of strangers. Instead, he offered silence, demonstration, and education. That's why the lesson lasted a lifetime. And that's why this story still spreads decades later. Not because of violence, but because of clarity. Somewhere in an archive at Golden Harvest Studios in Hong Kong, there may be footage that no one has ever seen. A camera operator was filming background material that day in March of 1973, capturing moments of Bruce Lee traveling between projects. If you look closely at the grainy film, frame by frame, you can see him boarding a plane at LAX. And in the background, just for a moment, there's a tall man in a white GI standing near the gate, watching Bruce walk away while holding a small business card. It's the exact moment a worldview changes. 7 seconds of combat, 50 years of impact. That's the difference between winning a moment and changing a destiny. If stories like this make you think differently, if they challenge how you see strength, success, and mastery, then you already understand why this channel exists. We don't just tell stories, we break illusions. So if you want more stories that go deeper, challenge ego, and change perspective, subscribe to the channel right now. Because the strongest people aren't the loudest. They're the ones still learning.